My cousin made millions writing about my wife's death. What I did at his book signing event ended his career. I, 35 never imagined I'd become someone else's story. Growing up in a small Midwest town, life was pretty ordinary until that summer 10 years ago. The kind of tragedy that either breaks you or reshapes you into someone stronger. I chose the latter, but apparently, my journey through grief and recovery was just material for someone else's success. I found out about the book through my sister. She called me one morning, voice shaking. "Have you seen it? The new bestseller everyone's talking about." When I said no, she went quiet for a moment. "It's our story. Your story. Every detail, down to the way you found her that day." At first, I thought she was exaggerating. My sister tends to be dramatic about things, always has been since we were kids. But something in her voice that morning made my stomach turn. I promised to check it out, mostly to calm her down, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that followed me through the rest of my workday. That evening, I stopped at Barnes & Noble on my way home. The book was impossible to miss, front and center in the new releases section, with a minimalist cover showing a broken wedding ring. The irony wasn't lost on me. The moment I opened that book, my hands started trembling. Page after page, I relived the worst day of my life through someone else's words. The accident was described exactly as it happened. A beautiful Saturday morning, my wife heading to her yoga class, the drunk driver running the red light at exactly 8:47 a.m. Even the specific intersection was the same, though he'd changed the street names. The hospital scenes were painfully accurate. The endless hours in the waiting room, the doctor's exact words when he told me there was nothing they could do. Even the color of the tile floor I stared at while my world collapsed. But it wasn't just the big moments. It was the small, intimate details that no one else could have known. The way I couldn't sleep on her side of the bed for months after. The specific brand of perfume I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The morning ritual I developed of making coffee for two before remembering I only needed 1 cup. Details I'd only shared with my cousin during those long, dark nights when he stayed with me that first month after. He was my rock then, the only one who saw me at my absolute lowest. When everyone else was walking on eggshells around me, he was there with tough love and practical support. He'd drag me out of bed, force me to eat, sit with me through panic attacks at 3 a.m. I told him things I couldn't tell anyone else, about the guilt, the anger, the moments I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. At the time, his presence felt like a lifeline. Now I realized he'd been taking mental notes, storing away every raw moment of my grief for future use. In his book, the main character goes through the exact same stages I did. The initial shock, the self-destructive phase, the slow crawl back to normalcy. He even included my specific coping mechanisms, starting with small goals like making the bed, then gradually returning to work, finding a grief counselor who specialized in sudden loss, the same type mine did, and eventually learning to live again. The only major difference was a romantic subplot he'd added, probably to make it more marketable. In his version, the protagonist finds love again with his wife's best friend. That part made me angry in a different way. My wife's best friend had been an incredible support system, helping me sort through her belongings when I was finally ready, never pushing or judging. Now people who read the book might look at our real-life friendship differently. The book was everywhere. Bookstore windows, online ads, morning shows, all praising my cousin's incredible imagination and deep understanding of loss. Every interview he gave felt like a fresh betrayal. He talked about his creative process and how he'd channeled universal emotions into his work. One interviewer asked if the story was based on personal experience, and he had the audacity to say it was purely fictional, but inspired by observing how people deal with grief. I watched his success grow for 3 months, watched the book climb bestseller lists, saw the glowing reviews roll in. People called it heartbreakingly authentic and a masterpiece of emotional storytelling. Each piece of praise felt like a knife twist. This wasn't creative writing, it was emotional plagiarism. The worst part was how it affected my healing process. I'd worked hard to process my grief in a healthy way, to honor my wife's memory while building a new life. But having my journey exploited, seeing my private pain turned into public entertainment, brought back feelings I thought I'd worked through. My therapist suggested confronting him privately, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. He'd just apologize, maybe offer me some money to keep quiet, and continue basking in his stolen success. No, this needed to be handled differently. The perfect opportunity came with his hometown book signing. The local bookstore, the same one where my wife and I used to spend Sunday afternoons, was packed. Our whole extended family was there, along with old high school friends, and what seemed like half the town. My cousin was at the front, beaming as he signed copies and told the same practice stories about how he drew from life experience, but transformed it through imagination. I waited in line like everyone else, watching him work the crowd. He was good at it. Always had been good at presenting himself exactly how people wanted to see him. When I finally reached the front, his smile faltered for just a second. But he recovered quickly, pen poised over the book. That's when I asked if I could say a few words to the crowd. He couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. My hands were shaking as I turned to face the audience, but my voice remained steady. I'd like to tell you all a story, I began. A true story about grief and trust, and what happens when someone takes your darkest moments and sells them without your permission. The room went dead silent as I spoke. I didn't rage or yell. That would have made me easy to dismiss. Instead, I simply told the truth, methodically and calmly. I described how my cousin had stayed with me after my wife's death, how I'd trusted him with my vulnerability, and how he'd taken every private detail and turned it into his fiction. I pulled out my own copy of the book, pages marked with sticky notes. On page 47, I said, the main character describes finding his wife's half-finished grocery list and having a breakdown in the cereal aisle. That happened on March 12th at the Kroger on Madison Street. My cousin drove me home that day. I turned to another marked page. Here, he describes the protagonist's ritual of calling his wife's voicemail just to hear her voice, until the phone company finally disconnected it. That happened on May 3rd. I know because it was the day before what would have been our anniversary. With each example, I watched the color drain from his face. The audience's expressions shifted from confusion to shock to horror. My aunt, his mother, had her hand over her mouth. The local newspaper reporter was scribbling frantically. Some people were pulling out their phones, probably fact-checking dates and details. I'm not here for revenge, I continued, though part of me definitely was. I'm here because the truth matters. Because grief isn't a commodity to be packaged and sold. Because the people praising this book's authenticity deserve to know just how authentic it really is. When I finished, I turned back to my cousin. I hope the royalties were worth it, I said quietly, then walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. Later, I heard he tried to claim it was all coincidence, that any similarities were unintentional. But the damage was done. The local paper ran the story. Then larger outlets picked it up. His publisher launched an investigation. The fallout was swift and severe. His publisher pulled the book and canceled his contract. Literary critics who'd praised his imagination wrote scathing follow-up pieces about ethical boundaries in fiction. He lost his teaching position at the local community college. His agent dropped him. Our family is divided now. Some support me, saying he violated a sacred trust. Others think I should have handled it privately, that I didn't need to destroy his career. My sister, caught between her brother and her cousin, barely speaks to either of us anymore. He keeps trying to contact me. The messages started with anger. How could I do this to him? I should be grateful he turned my tragedy into art. I'm just jealous of his success. Then they turned apologetic. He was wrong. He got carried away. He'll make it right. The latest ones are desperate. Please talk to him. Please let him explain. Please help him salvage something from this mess. I haven't responded to any of them. What could he possibly say? That he's sorry for exploiting the worst moment of my life? That he didn't think I'd find out? That he convinced himself he was honoring my story by sharing it with the world? The hardest part is knowing our relationship can never be repaired. For years, he was more than just a cousin. He was my closest friend, the person who helped me survive when I wasn't sure I could. Now those memories are tainted. Every late-night conversation, every moment of vulnerability, every tear shed in his presence, all of it feels like research for his book. Some family members say I'm being unforgiving, that everyone makes mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated decision to take someone else's pain and turn it into profit. He watched me struggle, helped me heal, then used that intimate knowledge to advance his career. That's not a mistake, it's a betrayal. I've been seeing my therapist more frequently lately. We're working through the complex emotions this has brought up, not just the anger at my cousin, but the way this whole situation has forced me to revisit my grief from a new angle. In a weird way, maybe this final betrayal is part of my healing journey too. The latest development is that I'm getting calls from journalists wanting to tell my real story. Some are offering significant money for exclusive interviews. But I don't want more publicity. I don't want to be known as the guy whose tragic story was stolen, or the guy who exposed his cousin at a book signing. I just want to continue living my life, honoring my wife's memory, and moving forward on my own terms. My wife used to say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward unburdened by anger. I'm trying to keep that in mind as I navigate this situation. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive my cousin. What I do know is that my story is my own again. And maybe that's enough. Sometimes at night, I still think about that book signing. About the look on his face when I started speaking. About the gasps from the audience. About the way my aunt started crying. In those moments, I question whether I did the right thing, whether there might have been a better way to handle it. But then I remember opening that book for the first time, seeing my private pain laid bare on those pages, and I know I couldn't have stayed silent. They say every story has a lesson. I suppose the lesson here is that trust, once broken, is like a shattered mirror. You might be able to piece it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. My cousin didn't just steal my story. He stole my ability to trust, to be vulnerable, to share my grief without wondering if it might be used against me. But he couldn't steal my resilience. If losing my wife taught me anything, it's that we're stronger than we think. We survive things we never imagined we could survive. And sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing alone. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding, not just from this betrayal, but from everything. My wife's parents still have me over for Sunday dinner. Her best friend still meets me for coffee every month. Life goes on as it always does. And my story, painful as it might be, remains my own to tell or keep private as I choose. That's something no bestseller can take away.